to resolve ourselves to a committee of the whole. We have Congressman Stewart here today. We'll have him address us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve into a committee of the whole for the purpose of hearing from our good Congressman Stewart.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. We're in a committee of the whole. Congressman Stewart, welcome to the Senate, Utah Senate. It's good to have you here.
Check, check. Thank you. President, thank you so much for the opportunity and the invitation. I recognize that you're in the middle of your day. I recognize that you're busy. I honestly wonder why you allow us to come speak to you. I don't know what we hope to accomplish, but I want you to know that I'm grateful for it.
It might enable us to pass 2 or 3 fewer bills at the end of the session.
Okay, that's good. And if I can
make pretty good. So
if we can make you guys look smarter, maybe I could do that for you as well. But I want you to know I really do appreciate it, and I approach this humbly, and I'm respectful of your time and the fact that you are busy. But I look among this group, and I see so many people who have become friends and people that I have come to respect. And I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate what you do. And I've said this about 1,000 times, so let me say it 1,001 times, and that is there's a reason that Utah is represented and acknowledged as one of the leaders in the nation, the best managed state, one of the best places to own a business, one of the best places to live. The list is long, but it's because of you and the constituents that you represent and the good people that are here in the state. I'll be respectful of your time. I would like to take a moment at the end to see if there's any questions or comments from you, but if I could share with you maybe just this thought. I believe, and this sounds, hyperbolic, it sounds kind of over the top, but it's really true. It's my sincere belief that we are at a critical time in our nation's history, perhaps the most dangerous time since 1939 in some ways. And we have this opportunity to define who we are as a people, what we really believe, what kind of nation we want to leave our children, what we think America represents to the world. I come home every weekend from D.C. and I'll sit on the airplane and I ask myself, have we done anything this week? Have we accomplished something? Is there something that I can go back and tell people about that I'm proud of? And once in a while there is, but far too often there's not. And I come home and, the first thing I hear is, why didn't you guys do this? And how come you're not doing this? And why did you do that? And you're a bad congressman. And frankly, that's just from my family. I get it from them more than anyone else. And then I go out and talk to my constituents, and they're actually kind of nicer to me. But I sense their frustration, believe me, and I share that frustration. But I think it's reflected in this comment again that this is such an important time in our nation's history. There are so many questions that we could talk about, challenges that we have. I want to talk about 3, and I would consider them the big 3. And that is the things that I think we have to address and address immediately. One of them is economic growth and opportunity. I have 6 children. 5 of them right now are in college or in residency or advanced degree programs. And there is a remarkable difference in the way they view their future versus the way I viewed my future when I graduated from college. And the opportunities that they believe they have versus the things that I just presumed and assumed and took for granted opportunities that I would have. And 2% economic growth is simply unacceptable. And the economic growth is, and the GDP, it's not very difficult. It's really a function of just 2 things, the number of people in the workforce and their productivity. And we can affect some of those things. We congratulate ourselves because the unemployment rate is, something like 5% or a little less, and Utah's been leading the country in their low unemployment rate for years now, but it's not an accurate reflection of the true economic picture. And it doesn't reflect the reality that so many people have been so discouraged for so long, they've simply quit looking for work, or they're underemployed, or they're working part-time. We need to create economic opportunity for them to come back into the workforce. And I have to, recognizing this is a bipartisan body, but I have to make a partisan statement here, and that is the House has been leading on this, and our Speaker, Paul Ryan, has been leading on this for a long time. The opportunities we have with tax reform, bipartisan tax reform, the opportunities that we have with regulatory reform, those things with a few others, I believe we would have explosive economic growth and give people that future that our children have begun to wonder whether they will have the same opportunities. The second thing I would mention And this is something that I think many of you will understand because my background as a military officer, 14 years as a pilot in the Air Force, and that is sitting on the intelligence community. I have this wonderful opportunity. It's a bit of a challenge sometimes to travel the world. And when I do that, it's not a shopping junket. I'm not sitting in first class. I'm sitting in the back row of airplanes. And for example, I was in Africa not long ago. In 5 days, I flew 52 hours, always at night. Never spent a night in a hotel in 5 days because I was on the airplane every night. But going to different places around the world, and the thing I hear again and again and again is this: where is the United States? Because we don't know if we can count on you anymore. We don't know if our alliance with you matters anymore. We don't know if you're going to be there if we really need you once again. We have to be able to show our allies, those people that are depending on the United States, that the United States leadership really matters in the world. I would share this one experience that I think reflects that. In Tunisia, with the president of Tunisia, President El-Sisi, who is a good person in my opinion. He's 88 years old. He has no intention of leaving or being driven from that country. He said, "I will die here one way or another." But as we were talking with him, he's talking through an interpreter, but as he first walks in the room, he speaks in English and he says, "Will you please help us?" And then we begin the conversation again. He's talking through an interpreter, but he would interrupt every once in a while and speak in English and say once again, "Will you please help us? You could help us and it would matter." Well, and we asked him what he needed, and he said, "I just need training. I just need special forces training. We can't control our border with Libya, and they're going to come and they're going to attack our tourism," which a vast majority of their foreign currency came from tourism. Well, that surprised me. I mean, when was the last time any of you went to Tunisia on a vacation? It's probably been a while. But it turns out that a lot of Europeans do. And less than a week after I had that conversation with them, terrorists came across the border from Libya and attacked at the museum, as many of you will recall, killed a lot of tourists. Then last spring they attacked on the beaches and killed 37 more. We could have made a difference there. I'm not suggesting we be the world's policeman. I understand we can't do that. But when we have important alliances like we had with Tunisia for more than 200 years, when we have nations that we know are in our national security interest to help them, we have to honor those alliances. The last thing I would say is this. The thing that drove me to get into politics and to run for office was our debt and our spending. I felt like we were committing national suicide. And if I had asked a group of people 3 years ago, what is our deficit this year? Almost everyone knew the answer to that. Almost everyone would say it's $1.1 trillion or $1.3 trillion. It was an issue that we were aware of and we talked about all the time. Tonight I'll have a town hall meeting in Centerville. I'll ask that group and most people won't know. And the reason they don't know is because it's not in the headlines anymore, because it's not as big of a problem. Our deficit last year was about $426 billion. Now, it's still really high. It's still unsustainable, but it's an enormous step forward from the $1.4 trillion deficits we had a few years ago. But that's the good news. The bad news is starting in 2017, because of the federal policies that have already been put in place, deficit spending will explode once again. And it will only be a few short years to when we're back to $1 trillion plus deficits. We have to be willing to take on the real challenge of entitlement reform so that we can, in a long term, really handle that deficit spending that will begin to explode again in 2 years. I'll conclude with this. Mr. President, thank you for the invitation. Again, I acknowledge the time, and I don't want to take more time than I should, but this final thought. I love George Washington, and the fact that when this man who could have been a king, but when he took the oath of office as our first president, and he swore that oath, and at the end of that he improvised with his own words, concluding the oath by saying, "So help me God." And then he leaned over and kissed the Bible upon which he'd placed his hand. And that has become the tradition since, that every president has concluded that oath of office by saying, "So help me God." I believe the challenges we have beyond us may be beyond the intellect and the effect of men. But I know that with God's help, we can overcome any challenge, as we have for 200 plus years. So when I say, in conclusion, God bless America, I really mean it. I'm asking God to please bless America, to please bless you in your work, as you are trying to represent your constituents, as you are trying to be an example of good governance that is reflected, frankly, and acknowledged pretty much throughout the country. Thank you for that. President, thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman, would you take a couple of questions from the body?
I would love to. I love the spontaneous jumping to your feet.
Okay.
Yes, I'd love to take questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the Congressman? Senator Okerlund.
Thank you, Mr. President. Great to have my congressman here, and
It's good to be with you,
appreciate
Senator.
all your work.
Thank you.
Everything you do in the district. Just a quick question on the Public Lands Initiative that was unveiled last week. Where do you see that going? What's the process? Where do you think it's headed, and what can we expect there?
Well, we support any initiative that helps, in any way return control of these federal lands to state or local control. And I think that's clearly, Rob's intention was to do that. It also, I think, illustrates the divisiveness and the kind of the polarization of this issue. It's very, very difficult to bring the parties together. But I think, again, Congressman Bishop did a masterful job of that. I don't believe these are mutually exclusive. I hear sometimes saying, well, if this initiative goes forward, it minimizes what I'm trying to do in another forum, and that is chairman of the Federal Land Action Group, which we're trying to set the legislative agenda to actually return all of these federal lands to state and local control. But again, I don't believe they're mutually exclusive. I don't believe that one hinders another. As we were just speaking, as I was on the House side with some of the attorneys there, and some of the legal efforts as well, I think that all of them are worthy of our support, that all of them are probably necessary in order to move the conversation. But gosh, we had this formal congressional hearing in St. George last week, and hundreds of people there. I don't know how many. We had hundreds and hundreds, 500 or 600 people there, I think. And to hear in that listening session, as we allowed citizens 5 minutes to stand up and to tell us which will be entered into the congressional record. Again, this wasn't a town hall; these were formal congressional meetings. But to hear their stories and to see the frustration. I grew up ranching and farming. I understand that, but in my district, it's particularly important. But it's not a fight that we're going to win by this weekend. It's going to take a little longer than that. Thank you,
Senator Weiler.
Thank you. I know you were appointed to the Appropriations Committee during your first year, and I think you're the first Utah congressman to serve on that committee in about 30 years. Can you tell us what your experience has been there over the past 2 years?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. It's difficult for me to do that quickly, but let me try, and let me tell you the bad news first, and that is the appropriations process has been broken for far too long in Washington, D.C. And again, I don't want to sound overly partisan, but the reality is the House of Representatives have done our work. We passed our 12 appropriations bills out of that committee last year, as we have done for many years. The Senate hasn't passed a single appropriations bills in years now. I believe it's been 5 years. So even though the House passes their appropriations bills, at least the committee does, if the Senate won't work with us on that, then it's very, very difficult to have a positive outcome. I think there's been a recommitment to a normal appropriations process. I know Paul Ryan has certainly pushed it, and we are actually getting feedback from Harry Reid, who's been the primary obstacle in that effort, that he will work with us in a more meaningful way this year. I hope that's true. If we can't fund the federal government through these 12 appropriations bills, then what are we left with? This obnoxious omnibus, where you don't have the opportunity to shape the spending like we hoped that we would. Now, I know this is kind of smoke and mirrors to you guys, because you guys actually work in appropriations process. And you don't pretend that when you spend $1 here, you have to pay for it in some way. And you don't pretend that these policies actually have economic outcomes. That happens far too often in Washington. But the reality is the Appropriations Committee, which has for hundreds of years been one of the most powerful committees in Congress, that the fact that you can't exert the will of the people through the appropriations process has been very frustrating. I think, though, that we're going to make some progress on that this year. I really do. I hope we do. To be stuck with this omnibus and some of the bad provisions and riders that are in that at the end of the year is just very frustrating.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, and
thank you.
Good luck back in Washington, D.C. and
we
hope there'll be more travels home, having felt like the week had been productive.
Thank you very much, and to all of you, God bless you in what you're doing. Thank you, President.
right, well, let's see. I think that finishes our work for the day. It's noon. I'll recognize Senator Van Tassel. Oh, yes. Senator Okerlund.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we dissolve the committee of the whole.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Let's see, how many people do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, barely have a quorum. Can we get some more? Make sure we got enough. Okay, all right, Tom, we're good. All right, Senator Van Tassel.
There will be a rules meeting in 4 minutes.
Okay, Senator Jackson.
Yes, from the third House, Thursday the 28th, caucus lunch today. There is History Day on the Hill down on the Rotunda. And then tonight is a governor's open house from 5:30 to 7. But before that, a reception held by the Legislative Coalition for People with Disabilities from 3:30 to 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Okerlund.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow, sharp. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. We are adjourned.